Well, Ryan, today's podcast, we have three interesting guests on tap, and it's all about affordable housing. So if you read or watch the news here in Charlotte, it's something that's certainly on your radar. An increased commitment to affordable housing was one of three key promises that City Council made in an October 2016 letter to the community. So the other two promises focus on good paying jobs, the skills to get them, as well as safety, trust, and accountability when it comes to relationships between our residents and law enforcement. But basically, what the community letter did as far as affordable housing goes, and housing, I guess, as well, is that it accelerated the city's current commitment to prioritize the availability of affordable housing. So, where do we stand with that? How does affordable housing get built? Whose responsibility is that? And can the city even build affordable housing, or how do they facilitate the process? There's a lot that goes into this, and we're going to answer all of those questions for you today. But we're going to start by hearing a personal story from Linda Mendez. And Linda used to live in the Fort Bragg area. She comes from a former military family, and now she lives in Charlotte. And there's a lot that happened in between. And Linda, thank you for being here to share your journey.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd love to hear your story. Can you tell me more about, when you decided to move to Charlotte and sort of the first steps that you took?
Sure. I'm a mother of three. My journey started with a divorce. So the kids and I needed a fresh start. And we had visited Charlotte previously.
Yeah.
And we loved it here. So we decided as our new start that we would move to Charlotte. And so that is how we ended up in Charlotte, April of 2014.
Got it. And you said when you first moved here, you had, sort of a weekend to throw something together and look at a few places.
Right.
And the prices, were a little shocking. And I understand that too.
They were they weren't in our budget.
Yeah.
So we went back to the Fort Bragg area and had to regroup. So then I started making some phone calls, and I actually talked to a person who was also a divorced mother who managed a apartment complex, and she gave us an opportunity to move there on a temporary basis just so that we could get our new start. And so that's how we started in Charlotte. Unfortunately, because of the pricing, the kids and I were in a small 1.5 bedroom apartment, and then so all of that time, the time that we were there, I started looking for something that was more suited for a family of four.
Sure.
And so that's where our journey began for
So,
affordable.
so how did you find out about affordable housing? Because you live in the Bright Walk community.
We live in the Bright Walk community. The affordable housing journey started when we discovered, or when I discovered as a newly single parent, that I couldn't afford to live in an apartment for 3-bedroom apartment in the Charlotte area. It was way out of my budget. So then I started looking for affordable housing, particularly, and we're not. Our income's not where we get Section 8 or anything like that. I just needed to get some affordable housing for my kids and I. So we drove around a lot. I did some Googling. And I started making some phone calls. And one of the phone calls I made was to the Charlotte Housing Partnership. And I started visiting some of the properties. And then I started putting in my applications.
And you said the wait time, from when you first kind of partnered up with them and started utilizing their services, the wait time for a lot of these places are longer than I expected.
They are very long, and that's one of the reasons that the children and I had to stay in that 1 bedroom for a year, a little bit over, because we were waiting for something to open up for us. And the waiting process was about a year. Sometimes it's a year, sometimes it can be less than a year. But once you meet all of the criteria, they give you a call. And then you have to move in right away because there's someone else waiting on that list for that affordable housing.
Sure. How do you and your kids like living there?
We love it. I mean, coming from a little small apartment, we love it. It's spacious, relatively new. It is in a safe community. I'm a resident leader there. So there's three apartment complexes that Charlotte Mecklenburg Housing Partnership have. There's the Alexander homes where we live,
Mm-hmm.
the McNeil, and then there are the Stevenson. And so I'm kind of like the voice for that, for the apartment home community, and also with the single family homes and the townhomes as well. So we are forming a great community of people in there. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean to you to be that voice, and why did you decide to do that?
Well, they actually reached out
Mm-hmm.
to residents who wanted to be a part of the Bright Walk community, and I was interested.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a lot of volunteer work for my kids' school. So I just thought this is one way that we can kind of get ourselves into the community, know our neighbors. And so they started us off with, once they found a team of people, they sent us all to Ohio. So we had they sent us to Neighbor Works where we could learn how to be a better community, where the apartments, the single family homes, and the townhomes could all kind of gel together and be a real community. So it's been a wonderful experience.
It sounds like people seem to really care, the folks who live there.
Absolutely. We all want to live in a safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, in order to do that, we know that we must stick together. And that's the apartments with the townhomes and the single family homes. And so there are a lot of activities. We have next door, we have Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
and so we send messages out whenever there's some type of event. We just had an event, a neighbors night out event where the whole community was invited, and it was very successful,
Cool.
and it was wonderful for our community and surrounding communities too.
Mm-hmm. So I know that the housing partnership that you worked through to get there, they provide a continuum of services, and tell me how that's going to lead you to perhaps a future goal for you and your family.
Absolutely. There are several families there.
Mm-hmm.
My kids and I have been there for a couple of years now. And so once you're there, it gives you the affordable housing, relieves the stress of how you're going to make ends meet. So you're not stressing about how you're going to make rent and your utility bills and all these other things. And it frees you up to kind of think about your next steps. So the next steps for myself and some of my neighbors would be affordable home ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And the Charlotte Mecklenburg Housing Partnership has a program for home ownership as well to kind of move to that next level, and then we can make room for some of the other people who were in my similar situation or other similar situations where people need that affordable housing, an apartment.
Great. Do you have any idea what that timeline looks like for you?
We're hoping I start my program in October.
Okay.
So we're hoping within a year, 2 years maximum,
Mm-hmm.
that I meet all the requirements. So we're halfway there.
Yeah.
We're halfway there. But with their help, hopefully they'll get us, me and my children, or lead us to where we're meeting the right realtors and the right financing
Mm-hmm.
for us so that we can get into our first home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does it mean for you when you think back to, that first weekend in Charlotte in the hotel room with the kids kind of looking for places to live to now thinking, in a year or two, we may own our own home?
Well, initially it was scary.
Yeah.
Coming to Charlotte, you don't know all the highways. You're like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
which way to go? All the traffic. But it was like new beginnings. So it was exciting at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know where we were going to, we just know we needed a new start. And for my kids, I said, hey, this is an adventure for us.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just rolling with their mom. But to start where we started, at the hotel for the extended weekend looking for places and wasn't very successful there,
Mm-hmm.
to meeting someone who just allowed us to kind of step out of that marital home into somewhere we could be until we could find affordable housing for ourselves. It's been quite a journey, and now that we are trying to move past where we are and to an affordable mortgage, it's a wonderful journey. The way it makes me feel is that I'm trying to do something wonderful and stable for my children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you are not alone. There are so many other people in, similar situations,
Mm-hmm.
whether, certain parts of your story resonate more than others for them. But any advice for folks in a similar situation? Anything that you wish you had known at the beginning that really helped you out?
Well, one of the things that I didn't know at the beginning was that there was affordable homes or affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
You think you just need to find an apartment complex that you can afford. And a lot of times they're not very safe. And so you kind of look through those and you go, oh my goodness, don't want to raise my children in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started looking for affordable housing, in particular in areas that were desirable or regentrifying or just kind of coming up, like the Bright Walk area,
Mm-hmm.
where it is safe and clean and it's a wonderful environment, very desired.
Mm-hmm.
The Bright Walk area is very desired. That is where I would say to someone, do the research. I didn't know where to start. Google affordable housing in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Drive around, because a lot of times where we live, it doesn't look like affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Go in, stop, talk to them, and see if it's something that affordable housing, and then just fill out your application and get on the waiting list. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Be patient.
be patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else that I left out that you might want to share about your journey? I think we hit it all.
I think that's it.
Okay. Well, Linda, thank you so much. I appreciate you being open
Mm-hmm.
enough to share with us your story.
Thank you.
And good luck with home ownership.
Thank you.
I hope that happens for you sooner rather than later.
Thanks so much.
So, Ryan, affordable housing can have, a lot of different connotations for different people, but it's so interesting to hear that sometimes it doesn't always look like, in your mind, the stereotypical, like, oh, these people don't care, they're not a community, that, she's trying so hard every single day, and it's so nice that she has that opportunity.
You're not kidding.
Yeah.
Especially it's so easy to paint that picture as to what you believe it is, with stereotypes or whatever the heck it may be. But when you get down and start to hear some of these stories from, a young lady who's trying to do the absolute best for her family. I'm a dad.
Oh, yeah.
I get it. It tugs at those strings where you get to learn a little bit about it. And it begs that thought of, do your research, learn a little bit about it before you start to judge or think too far.
Yeah. Yeah, hope, I feel like, is what I get out of that, and I think other people who may be in similar situations can hopefully take away the same thing.
Absolutely. I hope she gets it quick.
Yeah, exactly. So Linda mentioned the organization that she worked with, the Charlotte Mecklenburg Housing Partnership, also known as the Housing Partnership. And it's a nonprofit housing development and financial corporation that expands affordable housing and well-maintained housing for low and moderate income families in both the city of Charlotte as well as Mecklenburg County. So they play a huge role in the affordable housing options we have here. They offer a continuum of services, as Linda was kind of saying with her next goal that she has for her family. But their president, Julie Porter, she is here now to talk more about sort of their role in our community and what they're able to help folks achieve. So, Julie, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So you can explain it better than I can, but in layman's terms, how do you kind of explain for folks, everything that you guys do?
Yeah, and you were right. We provide a continuum of services. So one of the things we do is we work with certain neighborhoods and redevelop them and maybe even build some single family homes for home ownership, like Linda was talking about. But we also develop apartment communities for renters who maybe make from 30 to on up to 60% of median income. And then lastly, we do provide down payment assistance. That's in partnership with the City of Charlotte. We manage the House Charlotte program, which provides down payment assistance, right now up to $17,500 in down payment assistance if you live in certain parts of the city.
Right.
And we do homebuyer education.
Great. So, Linda lives in the Bright Walk community. How has that been a successful model for you guys?
Yeah, Bright Walk is probably our biggest endeavor. It was built on the site of the old Double Oaks Apartments, which was really in bad shape. It is a mixed income community, so there is market rate home ownership And then there's over 400 affordable housing rental properties or units there. And for us, having that mixed income community is very important because it drives other things in the neighborhood. It can drive economic mobility, and it can drive new retail and different things that all neighborhoods really need in Charlotte. So Bright Walk was a really ambitious endeavor, both for the city of Charlotte and for the housing partnership, but it has reaped benefits that we could not even imagine.
Do you have anything else planned, or are you hopeful to have something on that scale at some point in our
We don't really have anything in the pipeline like a Bright Walk. As you can imagine, it takes a tremendous amount of resources to do something on that grand a scale. It's 88 acres.
Wow.
So for us right now, and especially for what the city needs right now, which is affordable housing, and they need it in all parts of Charlotte, we are really concentrating on affordable rental, as well as some of the home ownership and building new single-family homes.
Got it. How does the partnership work between the city of Charlotte and the housing partnership? How do the two organizations work together?
Right. Well, the city of Charlotte, of course, has resources that we tap into. They actually fund the down payment assistance program through certain funding streams. And then they also help us with building rental housing through the Housing Trust Fund. For things like Bright Walk, there are other sources of funds like community development block grants that come through HUD. So all of those are relationships we develop with the city, whether we're acting as the city's developer or just as their partner.
Got it. So, in your opinion, why should developers be looking to include this type of development as they build in Charlotte? Because cranes are everywhere. It seems like something's always getting built.
Yes. And it doesn't happen very often that, somebody will voluntarily provide affordable housing because the numbers are extremely challenging. Why they should do it is really comes down to economics. When a new company comes into Charlotte, the first thing they ask is there housing that my employees can access? And if there isn't, they're going to look elsewhere. So just on the basic economics, affordable housing is good business. But more importantly, I think you look at things like the Leading on Opportunity report that was commissioned by the Foundation for the Carolinas that really says, okay, what does Charlotte need in terms of economic mobility for its residents? And affordable housing was a tremendous cross-cutting issue. It touched every other part of economic mobility. So if you're able to provide a family with a rent or a mortgage that is no more than 30% of their median income or their income, well, then they're able to access other services. They're able to buy that computer for their kid, or they're maybe able to save for that down payment of the home. And those are incredibly important for people to be able to get ahead. And so having that affordable housing in all parts of Charlotte becomes even more important because then they get access to good schools and good jobs and transportation.
Sure. Now, you said that for a lot of developers, they may not willingly want to include affordable housing. Is there any way that they're incentivized, or how do you go about encouraging them to do that beyond just like a moral obligation?
It's really difficult because there are very few tools that are set aside for for-profit and mostly market rate developers. There is a kind of a voluntary program that they can tap into that allows them to build more units than they would normally be able to build. But it's not used very often. The economics just simply don't work. They're challenging enough, right now, even for us. So I think that for them, they really don't see the economic benefit, even though they should see a social benefit.
So, you mentioned that the need right now in Charlotte is, the ability for people to rent units like this. Is part of that, as opposed to just encouraging, developers to build it, is it part of that also renovating, or, what I mean, kind of elevating some of the other options to bring it up to that? Or
I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Right now, Charlotte has a lot of housing that is affordable, but is in really disastrous conditions. And for organizations like the Housing Partnership to start to acquire those properties, rehab them over time, and keep those rents affordable is going to be an increasingly important strategy for us, because we all know what happens is you start losing units when there are redevelopment opportunities or if you've got a gentrifying area. So making sure that those affordable housing stay affordable but are also rehabbed so that they are good places to live is going to be something that's happening more and more often.
How do you feel like Charlotte as a city and even Mecklenburg County, because I know your organization touches that, how are we doing on affordable housing? And do you feel like we have a reachable goal in terms of what we need?
Of course, the goal right now was accelerated to 5,000 units in 3 years, but that's addressed with the full continuum from rental to rehab on up to home ownership. And I do think that the city will meet that goal because they are very nimble and are dedicated to making sure that they do it and providing whatever resources are needed. Our job is to help them.
Yeah.
And we're going to help them in any way we possibly can, whether that's increasing the down payment assistance program or whether it's building more affordable units.
Yeah. And then I'll have you go back to just one more thing before I let you go, Julie, and something that Linda had mentioned. Can you talk a little bit more about, how you help folks achieve that goal of homeownership?
Yeah. The down payment assistance program, that is actually the city's program called House Charlotte, provides grants up to $8,500 for most people, 80% of area median and income and lower. And it can go toward the down payment, it can go for an interest rate buy down, or to pay for closing costs on a home. And then also, if you're a city employee or a public service worker, you can get up to $10,000. And there's a new pilot program right now that says if you're buying a house in a high cost area, you can get up to $17,500. So it is a very generous program. It's one that has been very successful for the city. We do between 250 and 300 of those every single year. And so it's important production for the city, but more important, it gives home ownership opportunities to people who really need it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anything else that you'd like to mention?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Julie, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
So Ryan, do we have any idea if our next guest is here?
She is on her way.
Okay.
Should be here shortly. She's here. There you go. Look at that. We don't even need to pause for that.
Okay, there we go.
We're going to keep that because you know what? In show business, Gina, sometimes there's a pause that you just can't cut out. You're in show business.
Yeah, I figured I'd just let it lie for a second. But something that might surprise our listeners is that the city of Charlotte can't actually build the affordable housing. So here to explain is Pam Weidman. Pam serves as director in the Housing and Neighborhood Services Department, and in that role, she's responsible for overseeing the city's affordable housing programs, the 10-year plan to end and prevent homelessness, among other things. So, Pam, we appreciate you joining us. I know we just kind of threw you in here, so if you can take a moment to catch your breath, by all means.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. I'm used to being thrown into the fire.
Yeah, I believe it. So we spoke with Linda Mendez, before you got here this morning, and she was talking about her journey to secure affordable housing for her and her 3 children. And, kind of building off of what she and I were talking about, where should someone start? Where would you suggest they look? Who would you suggest they call if they're in a situation where they're finding trouble, having trouble finding housing that they can afford?
Right. We have many great partners in the city who provide affordable housing. One of the places to start would be with partners like Habitat for Humanity, obviously the Charlotte Mecklenburg Housing Partnership, the Charlotte Housing Authority. We have partners also like the Affordable Housing Group, Laurel Street Residential. These are all developers of affordable housing, but an initial stop might be at the city of Charlotte.
Gotcha. Now, this may seem like an obvious question, but when we ask people about affordable housing, it's certainly relative to what they consider to be affordable, right? So for the purposes of the city's role, can you explain how affordable housing is defined?
Absolutely. And I'll go a little bit further. I'll define it from a national industry perspective. Basically, when you talk about affordable housing, it really is housing that is financed in such a way that it affords a household to pay no more than 30% of their annual income for their household expenses. So more people automatically go to the mindset goes to who lives in the house, but it really is the way the house is financed that makes it affordable.
Got it. Now, can you talk about, what's the current need in Charlotte right now as far as affordable housing goes?
Right. So we're a couple of things I'll say about that. Number one is that we are currently engaged with a group called Enterprise to really work on a long-term strategic affordable housing plan. In terms of the need, I always like to remind people that it's not enough to simply plan for what the current need is, but you also need to plan for the future growth of Charlotte and what the need will be as we continue to grow as an urbanizing and prosperous city. We get about 44 new people per day. We're expected to continue to grow at that rate in Charlotte-Mecklenburg through 2040. So to answer your question directly, to the current need today in terms of simply a supply is about round up 22,000 units that we're lacking. But again, you can't stop there. You also need to look at what the current need is related to people who are cost burdened. And what we mean by that, they are paying more than that 30% of their annual income for their household expenses. So if you look at that number, it's about 50,000.
That seems like some daunting numbers because I know that, it's difficult to even kind of encourage developers to build this type of housing.
Right. And so the numbers are great. You could define that as daunting. And what I always say to people is it is a community issue that will require community solutions. And so the city will never solve the problem on its own. It's going to take an all hands on deck approach. And so we need partners. The city needs to be involved. The county needs to be involved. CMS needs to be involved. Certainly the Housing Authority and other great partners that we have doing this work. And certainly there's a role for the private sector to play as well.
So what is the city's role? What can the city provide?
So what the city of Charlotte is very fortunate. We receive about $10 million per year from the federal government to run our housing programs. Those are programs like the Community Development Block Grant, which we use a lot of that funding to do our housing rehab. We receive federal home dollars. Those dollars are used for things like rental assistance. We also receive federal dollars from a program called HOPWA, that's housing for people with AIDS and HIV, and that helps provide rental assistance and housing for folks living with AIDS and HIV. Mm-hmm. And then we receive an allocation called Emergency Solutions Funding, and that's primarily to help us house our homeless population. We're very fortunate as a city. We have a local source of funding called our Housing Trust Fund, where we use to provide gap financing to developers of affordable housing. They then leverage that funding with federal and state funding in the form of low-income housing tax credits to help build new affordable housing in the city.
Got it. Do you find that people are surprised that the city is not actually able to build it ourselves, or do you think that's pretty widely known?
And that's pretty widely known, and I would say it's pretty typical. Most in cities where there is city involvement is normally in the form of a redevelopment authority. So cities, I would say, generally don't get into the business of building housing. They're typically in the building of funding and supporting.
Sure. In your opinion, what's the biggest misconception around affordable housing in Charlotte?
There's always the NIMBY, so the not in my backyard, and some of those conceptions are affordable housing is going to bring my property value down. It's going to decrease my property value. There's no research that says it's going to decrease your property value. People are often concerned about the residents who live in affordable housing. One of the misconceptions is that people don't often realize that they are working families. They just don't, in many cases, don't earn those higher incomes, and that's why the affordable housing becomes so important. That they're paying no more than 30% so their annual income, so that they can increase their economic mobility opportunities.
Yeah. And I think that is, sometimes it does get a bad rap, but like we heard from Linda, and, I'm sure there are a ton of other people in her boat, but maybe those are some of the people who care the most because it's, it was such a fortunate thing for her to have it.
Absolutely. And you talk about the misconceptions. I mentioned earlier that many of the people who live in affordable housing or need affordable housing are working families, and they are working families. They are daycare workers. They are entry level teachers. They are many people who work for local government. And I will also add in here that the city of Charlotte did increase its minimum wage for its employees, and so that's certainly going to help. But they're often our solid waste workers, our folks who work in our water department. So again, working families just needing housing that will allow them to pay no more than 30% of their earnings for that for their housing expenses.
Yeah. So in 2016, City Council issued a letter to the community detailing their commitment to provide 5,000 workforce and affordable units over 3 years.
That's correct.
Is the city on track to hit that goal?
Absolutely, we are.
Can you tell us a little bit about where we stand now? Because obviously we're about roughly a year removed from when that...
So let me describe that goal. There's often a misconception about what that goal meant and what City Council did. City Council has always been focused on affordable housing and workforce housing. As a result of the Keith Lamont Scott shootings, they issued a letter to the community with 3 goals. Obviously, increasing the supply of affordable and workforce housing was one. It was never to build 5,000 new affordable units in 3 years. It was to create. And so we create through building new. We create through preserving existing affordable housing through our rehab program, which is funded by CDBG largely, as I talked about earlier. We also do that through the rehab of both single family and multifamily, and we do that through creating home ownership through our down payment assistance program. And then we do that by realizing affordable units from a voluntary perspective through our rezoning. So those are the 4 ways that we're helping council meet that goal. We are on track to meet our 3-year goal. On September 25th, council will have an opportunity to approve 5 developments that are requesting trust fund dollars, and with that approval, we will be at 60% of the way toward the council's goal of that 5,000 within 3 years.
Got it. Now, will that be at the city council meeting or the zoning?
That will be at the city council meeting on September 25th, so Monday night.
Got it. Okay. Well, Pam, anything else that you'd like to add before I let you go?
Just my continued thanks to our city administration and to our city council and to the community for really coming together around this issue. As I said earlier, this is a community issue that will require community solutions. The city of Charlotte won't be able to solve this problem alone. So again, it will take an all hands on deck approach.
Great. Well, Pam, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
And Ryan, what's really, standing out for me is how many people, how many organizations it really takes to make an affordable housing unit happen. And I think that that's sometimes where the disconnect can come for people who are frustrated and, understandably so in a lot of cases. But it takes a lot of people to make that happen. It's not just one person that can go out and say, okay, I'm going to do this, unless it's a developer. So, it's certainly a process.
It is a process, long process.
Yeah.
It seems like it's. I don't know how it works in terms of affordable housing instead of just what we heard from here, but it's like building a Hollywood movie or something like that, where you spend years building that script.
Yeah.
Then you spend months putting the video together. Then you could spend more months, if not a year or 2, getting that final piece together and building it all and making it come to life.
Sure.
So it's interesting learning how that process works in affordable housing, because these things don't come out of nowhere. It takes years to build it or create it for the most part. NIMBY. I like that. I'm taking that with me.
I know. I hadn't heard that acronym before.
Not in my
backyard.
Yeah.
I think that acronym certainly applies to more things than just affordable housing, but
absolutely.
There's
Fire ants for one.
Yeah. Yes, to be kosher.
Exactly.
Well, I realize that we threw a ton of information at you. Don't miss anything by subscribing to the podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud. Find it at www.charlottenc.gov/podcast. Our social media manager pushes the links out on our city's social channels as well. You can find that at Facebook and Twitter at CLTGov. As always, thanks for spending some time with us. If you have any questions or comments, reach out on social media. Email us at crowncast704@gmail.com. Whatever floats your boat works for us. So join us next time.